Hey everybody, Chris Peters here from FloHockey with another scouting report for the 2024 NHL Draft. And today we're going to focus on one of the top players out of the WHL, Cayden Lindstrom, a 6'4" center, over 200 pounds, a physical presence, a good skater, but also a guy that dealt with a lot of injuries this year. And so his projection has been a little bit tougher to kind of figure out in terms of where he's actually going to go on draft day. But no question about it, he is a player that NHL teams are very excited about because of the athletic toolkit that he possesses and the production that he showed this season when healthy. Let's go to the stats for this year. 32 games played, 27 goals, 19 assists, 46 points, a 1.43 points per game average. He also had 66 penalty minutes for the Medicine Hat Tigers. So Cayden Lindstrom is an interesting case because, as we see, he only played 32 regular season games. He played 4 games in the playoffs. He dealt with injuries, multiple injuries over the course of the season that limited him. He will not play in the World Under-18 Championship, which is another opportunity for him to kind of reestablish himself among the class. And so you look at the different things, and before we get into the scouting report, you have to talk about the injuries because that creates a layer of risk for teams when they're deciding whether or not to take somebody in the top of the draft. There's also the fact that he plays a more physical brand of hockey. Will his body be able to handle that as he progresses through the ranks? That's another question that has to be asked. But even more importantly, there's just not a huge sample size to go off of compared to his peers. So that's another thing that you have to consider when talking about Cayden Lindstrom. That said, when he did play, there were a lot of things to get excited about. At that 6'4" frame, closing in on 6'5", he has some speed. He's got the ability to move in. He can get to the middle of the ice. He can get around defenders. He can create some separation. That's a very important thing, especially for a player of his size. He's got scoring ability. He's good around the net. He has a really tremendous shot. He can score from distance. He can score from in tight. He does it all the different ways that you need him to do it. He also can read plays well enough to get into the right spots to be a more dangerous goal scorer. So you've got that going for him as well. Good hands, and then on top of all of that, you add that physical element that he plays with, his ability to win board battles, his ability to displace players from the puck with his body, his ability to create body checks, and even a little bit of an intimidation factor, and that's why you see Cayden Lindstrom so high up on boards. But as we talked about, the injuries, the fact that he hasn't played as many games, the fact that we didn't get to see him in some of these high leverage situations does create a little bit of concern in terms of where to place him on draft day. Because when you talk about those top 5 kind of picks, you want to see a little bit more than we've seen necessarily from Cayden Lindstrom this year. So you may see him slide a little bit further down, but it's going to be hard for him, I think, to fall outside of the top 10 just because of the athletic toolkit that he possesses, the fact that he's got the size, this physicality, the offensive capabilities. There's a lot of upside there. There's a lot to like about him. Now, there are some concerns about whether or not he makes enough plays, whether he drives play enough. The hockey sense component has come into the fray. Is he a wing versus a center? That's another debate to be had about him. But when we look at NHL projections, I still think there's a top 6 projection for him. That's the ceiling that we're looking at. I think he's probably a number 2 line scorer. It'd be great if he can play center. I don't think he's a number 1 center. I do think he could be a number 2 center if he does play the center position. But when I look at NHL comparables and I'm trying to think about the different ways that he plays, I really think one of the guys that stands out to me as a 1-to-1 comparable for him in the NHL today is Alex Tuch of the Buffalo Sabres. There's a speed component, there's a scoring component, there's a physicality component, does a little bit of everything, and that's kind of what I could see for Cayden Lindstrom. So does that mean he's going to be, a superstar talent? I still think that that's the potential that he possesses, but as I look across the NHL and try to find players that look like him, I see a little bit more of Alex Tuch. No question in my mind that Cayden Lindstrom is going to go pretty high in this draft. He's going to be a guy that teams are going to love working with because they can continue to develop him after the fact. But I think there's a lot to like about Cayden Lindstrom, and that's why he is going to be a very high pick in the 2024 NHL Draft. Stay tuned for many more scouting reports from me at FloHockey.